and the Declaration of Independence. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach, here with Mark Meckler. And Mark, if you had been in this room when it happened, when the Constitution was created, and George Mason stands up at the very end to say, hey guys, wait a minute, we messed up, we got a real problem here, what would you do?
I've probably been irritated. Sit down. Let's go home. It's 2 days, September 15th, 1787, 2 days before the end of convention. You guys have heard the story. It's hot in here.
Yeah.
Like they didn't have HVAC back then, so it's hot. The windows are boarded up. They're all irritated by now. They want to go home. Mason stands to address the men, and he says, we have a terrible problem with the document we've drafted.
I can hear the groans now.
Yeah, everybody's like, oh, here's the word again. Right?
Yeah.
And he says, we've given the power to the federal government to propose amendments should they deem them necessary, but we've not given the same power to the people acting through the states.
Now I got to stop you there. Back up. They've been here for all those weeks to create a federal government. They've redesigned the whole thing. The Constitution is designed. Here's our 3 branches of government. Here's what states can do. Here's what federal government can do. They created all of that. And he's saying, wait a minute, we have a problem.
Yeah, there's a little bit of lost history in there. Actually, the very first draft that went out to the working committees contained this now. The states had the power.
I didn't know
The
that.
federal government didn't, actually. And when it came back, somehow it had been reversed. And so he notices this at the last minute, literally brings this problem up. Everybody groans. We think we don't have the videotape, right? But then he asks a question that I think is the real question. And this question resonates across the ages. He says, are we so naive that we believe that a federal government that becomes a tyranny will ever propose amendments to restrain its own tyranny?
Now, wait, let me put that in country boy language. I'm a country boy. That means if the federal government ever gets out of control, do we really think the very people that stole power, that took it without permission, will just give it back? We'll just hand it off to them.
You know, whenever I tell this story in a hall or at a meeting somewhere, people laugh.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what they did. You know, we don't have a recording. You can kind of tell. Madison's notes at that point, they say nin com. It's Latin for no comment, essentially. That's an abbreviation. No debate. These guys debated everything.
That's the 1787 version of mic drop.
Exactly.
Right?
I call it the forehead slap. Like everybody just went, oh my God,
you missed that.
I can't believe we missed that. And so Eldridge Gary proposes the second part of Article 5, gives the states 2/3 of the power to call and convene a convention of states for proposing amendments. Then the vote's taken. I think this part's incredible. Imagine them in this room, right? Ready to go home. It's unanimous. Absolutely. So it was so obvious to them that we had to give this power to the people acting through the states, that there's no debate, and it's unanimously done.
And let's just summarize that real quick. So they created the Constitution. They created the 3 branches of government. They created all these different levels of accountability. And they said, we didn't solve everything. In the future, there will be issues. This will need to be amended. Congress can propose amendments and send it back to the states, and they ratify it. And what George Mason changed, what they actually put in there at the end is the states can propose amendments. The states come together and propose amendments, and then it goes back to all the states to be ratified. And unanimously, they said, that's a good idea. We need that second mechanism.
Yeah, important to remember what that means is they gave the ultimate power not to the federal government, not to Washington, D.C., but to the people of the states.
Thank you, George Mason.
So here is Article 5, right out of the Constitution. We've got some pocket constitutions on the back table if you'd like to procure one. By the way, I'll put it on shameless pitch right now. We are a 501c4 charitable organization, so this is not, we're not tax deductible, but we don't really have a budget to do these kind of things. So for instance, you see the iPads on the table. For if you haven't signed the petition, please do so using one of the iPads. Those are on loan to us. So we're trying to get donations to be able to purchase our own iPads within our region here that we can have these meetings. So if you're so inclined, we've got T-shirts and some other things back there, and Terry will be happy to help you out at the end of the meeting. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses deem it necessary, shall propose amendments. Okay, and then I'll skip down to, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the states, of the several states. They knew that, you know, back then when they wrote this, they had 13 states, right? Probably going to have more, right? So however many states there are, when 2/3 of them apply, send in an actual official application to have a meeting, to have a convention. What's the convention for? Shall call a convention for proposing amendments. It has to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. any kind of crazy proposal would be out of order and would never pass as a amendment. So, which in either case, again, continuing, shall be valid as part of the Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the states. So 2/3 of the states say, hey, we want to have a meeting. Anything that comes out of that meeting has to be ratified on an individual amendment basis by 3/4 of the states. We'll get into that. We'll get into that further. So our action plan is pretty simple. Use Article 5 for its intended purpose for the states to call a convention to draft and propose amendments. Time for Mr. Garrison, I think.
I'm coming. I'm over here, not over there.
He's moseying on up here. Come on. Come on, buddy.
Nice. Drive that Harley.
Yeah, drive the Harley up there. Okay. Let's hear from Mark Pettis.
No, for those of you that are new to COS that came to this meeting and took time out of your day, you can give yourselves an applause.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, my name is Mark Harrison, but you heard that earlier. I'm not gonna beg forgiveness, but I am not politically correct. Lance asked me to do this a couple of weeks ago. I'm not a very good public speaker, but you're gonna get what you get, so. How it works, and if the Constitution was written for the people, not for government, not for federal government, not for administrations. It's for the people. And we are the people, right? So what we do then is we collect these petitions. Who signed a petition already? Excellent. Well, we know you did. I encourage you to sign the petition. The more petitions we can get to show our state legislators that their constituents are wanting this, the better chance in Illinois we have. I know Illinois is a long shot, but we already got, what, over 80,000?
83,000.
83.
I'm sorry?
Close to 83,000.
Close to 83,000. We need 853,000. So once that happens, we already have a joint resolution in the House, right?
HDR 3.
But the Senate hasn't passed it yet. I don't.
The House has neither one. It's in committee.
Yeah, okay. So once we get enough constituents to tell our representatives that we want this convention of states, then they pass a joint resolution. We become one more state that is required to call a convention. That's where I just went to. So then the state legislators decide on who's going to be the commissioners that get sent to Washington to oversee this convention of states. Now, each state gets only one vote. It's not a populist vote. It's a one vote per state, which is nice because, you know, poor old Wyoming has the same right to voice their opinion just as, you know, Illinois does. So one vote, one state, one vote. And during the convention, amendments are proposed. We just had a mock convention of states in August, I think it was.
Something like that. Yeah.
And a whole lot of amendments came out of that, right? I mean, it was.
Like seven.
But they were all basically the same with different verbiage, right?
They were all different.
Okay.
That was in 2 days.
I'm sorry?
They had 2 days to do it. This will be, the convention will be months.
Possible years. So they propose, they debate, they write the verbiage for these amendments. And then once they're passed out at convention, they go back to the states where the states have to ratify those one or. So
Your question, when you say commissioner, who's the people that go down there? Is that, Our elected officials.
They're picked by our elected officials.
They're picked by your elected officials.
Yes. Now,
Each state can determine its own methodology for selecting the commissioners. We call them representatives or delegates. The official term is commissioners. So each state determines that. Each state legislature determines that.
how the commissioners are chosen.
Right.
So they
And how
could be
they-
elected officials, they could, may not be.
So you could have a state like Illinois that people want this, and then they say, we'll put our own people in it. Right?
Well, it's fine, but they only get one vote,
Yeah, okay.
you know.
California can send 150 commissioners. They get one vote.
And that's the beauty of the whole thing. So then 3/4 of the state have to ratify anything that comes out of the convention. And it could be, like Barry said, 7 amendments, it could be 3 amendments. One could pass all through the nation, 3 could pass all through the nation. We don't know until that happens. And then a new baby's born. Am I still up?
You're still up.
So, as it says here, and I'll read it to you if you can't read it, I might have to get closer anyways. I support an Article 5 convention. It is time for states to go on the offensive to limit the overreach of the federal government. I urge you to support all of the Constitution and thus the efforts of the Convention of States to pass their extremely well thought out and strategic legislation in your home state, and thus join us in a call to restore our constitutional republic. David Barton. Do we know who David Barton?
He's Wall Builders. Wall Builders is the organization he and his son have. They have an archive of some of our most precious documents,
Okay.
and we can take free classes from Wall Builders and stuff like that.
And this is one of the main reasons I joined with COS, because I'm tired of the federal government and their related agencies telling me how to live my life. And taking my money, which I don't have to say it. I'm still waiting on Form 1040, where I can have Ukraine as a dependent.
Do what?
Have Ukraine as a dependent.
Oh, nice.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If, once you open up the Convention of States and they go in and change, add an amendment, can they also take in, like, the Second Amendment and take it out?
No.
I think that's something that we're gonna really talk about during the Q&A.
Yeah,
We're
Okay.
gonna dive into that.
we'll dive in deep
All
with
right,
that.
I got it.
Yeah, this is just adding to the Constitution.
Okay.
So how does our strategy work? Oh, jeez. Oh, this is on the petition.
These are the applications.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is on the petition as well, yes.
So this is the application that the state makes, all the states will make. And this is actually the verbiage that they'll use. We actually helped write the application for all the states because when we go to the convention, we want to make sure they all have the same application, so we're all doing the same thing. We can't have 50 different applications with different things. They have to agree. So that's what the application is.
Anything else, ladies?
You can read the bold stuff, read the bold print.
The bold prints. Section 1, calling of an Article 5 convention limited to proposing amendments to the Constitution of the United States that impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and limit the terms of office for its officials and for members of Congress.
That's
Two important words, limited to.
You have a question?
So you got balanced budget and you've got term limits, and what's the limit, the one in the middle, limit the
Power and jurisdiction of
Yeah.
federal government.
Is that-
Essentially bringing power back to the states as the Constitution was written.
10th Amendment?
10th Amendment,
Yeah.
that's right.
all right.
Good point. Reinforcing the 9th and 10th Amendment,
Okay.
maybe.
Which the federal government is using it to, well, I won't go there. I caught myself. Largest grassroots army. Now, I've worked many political campaigns over my years, and that is the best way to get people involved, is grassroots. As Lance said, we don't have any money. We have a very small budget, but that's how grassroots work. I belong to another organization now that my dues every year are only $25. What's asked of me in that organization is to call my representatives, to call my senators, to visit them in their district offices whenever I can, to make the legislators know that we are out there. And it's funny because this other organization, they don't read every bill that comes out. They rely on staffers, or they rely on their constituents to let them know how they want to vote on it. Or they're just going to vote the party way. So it's up to us to get a hold of our legislators, and let them know how we feel. And it's just not just one time. It's going to be like every election cycle. Grassroots leadership teams in all 50 cities, 5 million volunteer supporters. Okay. And we keep going strong. We had 2 states last year.
Well,
3.
4 last.
Or you include Kansas.
Yeah, but we haven't had any this year, sadly. This is an interesting slide because it's telling you that in general, 2/3 of the people in the country would want a convention of states.
From the top down,
Yep.
85% of Republicans support this. 50% of over 50% of Democrats support this. And the independents, almost 65%. And it makes sense because I think all Americans' eyes are starting to open up to see what's going on at the federal level. I mean, you mentioned 34 trillion in debt. That's unbelievable. And if I didn't balance my budget at home, what's going to happen?
You're gonna go bankrupt.
Yeah, I go bankrupt. And then they got some other stats there. Ethnicity, 65.7% support overall. Sounds pretty strong to me. And here's Illinois. Took a really big swing up come between 19 and 20.
Graph's a little bit old, sorry.
More signed petitions, more active volunteers, which you hope all of you will be.
Back to that slide for a minute, just to toot our horn a little bit. Notice that second bullet point,
70 active district.
the Illinois team is the largest volunteer team in the country. Here we are, deep blue, supermajority, Springfield blue, and we're the largest team in the country.
Maybe that's why.
That's why. That's why, because we're energized. We did 60 events, over 60 events in this year alone, as a team, statewide.
Or does it show how the system is made up? We represent people. So
Thanks, Mark.
Yes, Mom. Endorsers of Convention of States, there's a whole lot of, I like Kirk Cameron's up there. Never liked him as an actor, but I like him now.
David Barton's there, Clear Grove Center.
Well,
Okay.
it's not official, you know.
Rand Paul, I like
He
him.
pitched it.
And here's the states that have signed the joint resolution at their legislatures.
I understand.
There's another, do we have that other one where it's, where they're leaning?
No, we don't.
So we have 20 now since Kansas passed.
Kansas, it's in litigation, actually.
thank you, Mark.
Yeah, Mark.
So as we get bigger and our voice gets louder, So does the opposition. They get loud, and boy, do they get louder and ramped up, and they get organized. There's one thing that the opposition does is they organize very well. We have to organize also. That's why we do all these events. We did over 60 events this last year, more than any other state. Everybody wants to have a voice, and that's why we're here today. So we're going to go through some of these common objections that we get all the time. And then we'll talk about it. And then we're going to have a Q&A after this. And we're going to just have open the floor and ask your questions. But that opposition is growing. Everybody knows who George Soros is, right? Raise your hand. Right? We know who George Soros is, right? He's got the Common Cause group. He's got about 250 other groups. They're really trying to defend what we're trying to do. Right? And that's a big opposition to overcome. But our voice is getting louder. So, some of the common objections we get. The existing Constitution is invalid because in 1787, the convention exceeded its mandate to modify the Articles of the Confederation by writing a new Constitution. Not true. Because their directive was to render the Constitution adequate to the exigencies of government and to preserve the Union. Their objection was to do whatever they could to preserve the Union. That's what they did. And then the new Constitution passed, and it was accepted by Congress, and it was ratified by all 13 states. Completely ratified, so it is the law of the land, and it has been the law of the land for actually over 240 years now. So that is not true. Opening up the Constitution to amendment could end in a runaway convention. We hear this all the time. I think they call it a con is what they really call it. They can't. Every state uses the same application. Every state is saying, I want term limits. I want federal overreach. I want that limited, right? I want, those are our three pillars. So take, excuse me, one second. So they're all doing this together. And so it's not going to be a runaway. It won't be a runaway. And furthermore, let's just say, and someone brought this up, let's just say someone proposes an amendment that says, hey, we're going to take away your First Amendment right.
Not germane, rule not germane.
It's not in order. Right. But even if they did, what would have to happen? They have to sit there and grant the amendment, and then it has to go where? Back to the states to get ratified, and you need 38 states to ratify it. It would never happen. But it is out of order. It is out of order and not allowed to be taught. And it won't get out of committee. It just won't. Misguided conservative opposition. The Constitution Convention will cater to special interests. It's not going to pertain to special interests because, again, we have three things that we're going to debate, right? And the convention is only for proposing those ideas. The genius behind this is the states are deciding, not the federal government. Then after the states all agree on whatever propositions they had, when they agree, where does it go? It goes back to the states for ratification. And you need 38 states to ratify. So that's not going to happen. And currently, what we have, isn't the current situation already out of control? Isn't spending completely out of control? Isn't government overreach out of control? Isn't term limits out of control? So what do? Do we do nothing and allow them to continue down this path? Or do we get involved? We start talking to our senators and our congressmen and start letting them know that we're serious about this. This has got to stop. Because at some point, it's all going to implode. And God help us when that happens. So several delegates wouldn't sign the Constitution because it was unauthorized. It's true. Not that it wasn't unauthorized, but there were people that would not sign it. And the reason why they wouldn't sign it is because they didn't attach the Bill of Rights to the body of the document. That's why. But once they did, and they promised to do that, and they did, everybody signed it. Mason also believed that the document was drafted to give too much power to the central government. That's why he stood up at the end and said, hey guys, we got to change this. put in Article 5. Shouldn't we just let Congress propose amendments? With an approval rating of 19%, do we want Congress, basically just saying, hey, don't worry about it, guys, we got this? No, we do not want this, right? And even if they did, what would have to happen, right? They just can't, make these amendments. It has to be approved by who? The states, right? That's the genius behind all of this. Our forefathers, I don't know how they thought of this, but they say if we're going to amend the Constitution, it's got to be by the people, for the people, of the people. I think Lincoln said.
Yeah, maybe we're answering some questions right here, but I love that last part. So, for instance, back to your question, probably there are quite a few folks in Washington D.C. who would love to take away the Second Amendment. They'd love to take away all of our
And the
guns.
first.
And the first, right? Well, how come Congress can propose an amendment today to rescind the Second Amendment? Why don't they do it?
Because it would never happen.
Because they know it would be political suicide and there would be riots in the street and they would all be run out on a rail, right? Right? So anyway, that's.
What they would do is someone in Congress would say, okay, well, here's the amendment, we're going to take away your Second Amendment rights. And then some congressman would stand up and say, great, I want a roll call. I want to know how you voted. Get you on record. They would never do that. They want to vote in secrecy, right? Just like we just saw this happen with the Republican Congress when they were electing the speaker, right? McCarthy said he was going to get 100 votes. The votes came through and he came in at 33, I think. And then someone said, hey, I want a roll call. I want to know how you voted. Does anybody know how many votes he got when they had the roll call? 0.
Well, when they actually had to be on
Yep.
record.
Well, you have to be on record. He got 0 votes. Same thing would happen if they tried to take away our First or Second Amendment rights. Would never happen. Okay, we have term limits. They're called elections. No, we don't. That's a fallacy that all of our elected officials like to say because they know the odds are in their favor.
The deck is stacked in their favor.
The deck is stacked in their favor. What's the reelection rate? That's 90% plus. They know that. That is not reasonable at all. As we said, 100% of the states of the Senate were reelected in 2022. So if you rank for reelection, you get your seat. It's insane. And a 19% approval rating. Sorry, I do get excited. Congress already ignores the Constitution. Why would they follow a few amendments, right? Well, that's a really good question. And right here, history shows us that amendments are followed closely for about 100 years, which is very true. And the reason that happens is because it's voted on the state level and it's voted by the people. And the people have said, this is what we want. And you've got a minimum of 38 states, probably more, that said, we want term limits, say. And so they will follow it for about 100 years. And after 100 years, they're going to figure their way around it and something else is going to happen.
Can you give me an example of one of those amendments?
10th Amendment.
Go ahead.
10th Amendment. Somebody got the 10th Amendment handy? Read it. One of you
Any
guys.
powers not enumerated in the Constitution, amendments are back. to
Reserved
states.
back to the states, right? Exactly. Probably for a first 100 years or so, that amendment was very, very powerful, right? But slowly, the federal government has managed to chip it away to the point that it's almost irrelevant.
And here's what happens. Here's what happened. Federal government got wise and they said, hey, we're collecting all of this money from the states, from all of us people. Now we have it. You know what we're going to do? We're going to start giving a little bit back to the state. And we're going to make them dependent on us. That's how we start getting power.
It's beautiful.
That's how they do it.
And that probably started with the first one.
That's starting with PI. Right. And so that's what happens, right? Little by little, they figure a way around it. Okay, so now we want to kind of go in, because I know a lot of you have questions. We answered a few of them, but at this point, a lot of people probably have some questions. Who has questions? Raise your hand. Great. And as questions get asked, there'll be more questions. So can you come up, Barbie? We're gonna have, our regional captains and Barbie, our regional communications director, answer all these questions. I'm gonna ask you just a couple things. Please keep this centered around Convention of States. You know, we're not really here to talk about, you know, other issues, you know, keep around these things, keep around the Article 5 of the Constitution. Before as they're getting ready, I want to tell you one story. When I first came to my first Convention of State meetings, I was frustrated and I was ready to do something. I didn't know what to do. And here's what got me involved. I was watching Senator Kennedy vet some judges one day. And you know how he talks, Southern old boy, right? And he's asked this judge, you know, about, you know, can you do me a favor? Can you tell me what Article 5 is? I'm watching this at home. Here's a judge that has been appointed to a federal judgeship. And here's Kennedy says, can you tell me what Article 5 is? And I'm sitting at home going, yes, 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 I can tell you, right? And the judge answers this way. Thank you for the question, Senator. In my 22 years on the bench, I believe I've never had to deal with that issue. And he just stopped in his track and he said, can you repeat that? Right? And she repeated it again. He says, you will never, ever be a federal judge. So if you're thinking to yourself, I can't do this because I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I'm not either. I can't speak intelligently about these things. You've got a judge that's been doing this for 22 years that didn't even know what Article 5 was. You can do this. I guarantee you can do this. If I can do it, so can you. Okay, let's start. Who's got a question? Stand up if you don't mind.
Earlier, you were talking about when these amendments get proposed, they cannot get rid of other amendments, or can they override other amendments?
Go ahead.
I'm referring to the 17th Amendment. Senators are originally appointed by states. Now they're elected by the people, which is wrong. That's not the way the Constitution is written.
Right.
Okay, so when we get to convention, 17th Amendment would be fair game, because repealing the 17th Amendment would reduce the size, scope, power, and jurisdiction of the federal government and bring that power back to the state legislature where it belongs. Because originally, the legislator, the senators were appointed by each of the state legislatures. And they reported to those state legislatures, and they could be recalled by those state legislatures. So that could be germane. The reason, supposedly, I wasn't around, I'm old, I'm not that old. The reason it was put in was it was felt that there was too much money and power in the appointment process. So have those senators elected. Well, is there money and power now in the election of senators? Of course there is. So that would be germane.
It would, but if I think about it reasonably, I'm not sure if the people would want it because they wouldn't understand it, right? Now that we've been given the right to quote unquote vote for our senators, I'm not sure that the people, rank and file, public would want it. I'm not sure, but
I would
he's right.
consider it a bargaining chip if they said they wanted to return. I would say, well, let's put the senators back to.
I think educating our populace would be.
Would be our key.
Right, that is key.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The purpose originally was that the Senate was supposed to represent the state as a political entity itself. The House was to represent the people of the state.
Exactly.
And just going back to the meeting Wednesday night, we got to meet Mark Meckler. He gave a speech at the an hour and 50 minutes with no notes. And one of his points was that the states hated each other. And they were constantly battling over navigation rights and trade, relations with, they call them the Indians. They did when I was going to school, Native Americans. And the Constitution, in its brilliance, came up with this concept of federalism. Some powers retained by the states and the people, and 17 enumerated powers that were given to this new federal government. One of the slides that was up before spoke to the fact that the states are the parents. The federal government is the child. And now we have a juvenile delinquent.
Right.
One other tie-in maybe to the state issue is Convention of States. The same thing the senator was supposed to do was represent the states as an entity to the federal government. This is a convention of states. That's why there's only one vote. It's not a convention of delegates, it's a convention of each state. So that's one state, one vote. We're using the state.
Which is why it's not an electoral college vote. Go ahead.
You've got, what, 19 states now, maybe 20 with Kansas?
Right.
And Iowa and Idaho on the cusp?
Yeah.
That would be 22, you gotta get 34. How long do you think, what are the prospects beyond the 22? And how long do you think it would realistically take to get them?
You know, maybe let me take that one. Even Mark had a question similar to that. Barry asked a question. We're at 19, maybe 20. We've been at this for 10 years. And Mark's answer was very candid and very straightforward. And he said, it's hard. So there's a lot of opposition to this. There's a lot of misinformation, as we saw, you know, and some of you, if you're familiar with Common Cause, if you've watched some of their stuff, they always refer to this as a con, right? A constitutional convention. Anyway, to answer your question, I don't know if it's going to happen in my lifetime, but or Barry's lifetime, really. I don't know. I'm not going to quit. I'm going to keep working at it. We need to get to 34, right? Our intel tells us that if we can educate the state legislators at some of these states that are kind of on the cusp, we probably have 32, 33 conservative leaning states. It's fair to say, right, that the states who would vote for this are probably, for the most part, conservative, not quote unquote liberal. I'm trying to be careful not to use that term incorrectly. But the point is, so we got 32, maybe 33 states that should be leaning towards calling a convention. So we need one or maybe two blue states to tip it in. And we're here because against all odds, David and Goliath kind of a situation. We want Illinois to be the 34th state.
I can say this real quickly that the federal government wants to obviously centralize power, right? They've done that with the FBI, right? They took away all the decision-making at the local offices and they brought it all to the Washington, D.C. The whole idea is to centralize power. That takes away power from the people. I'm a little bit more optimistic, to be honest with you. I think this will happen in my lifetime. I can feel a groundswell coming up. I see it on social media. I see it in the conversations when I'm at a restaurant now. People are fed up. We have a little tool that we have. The number of people that are kind of requesting information from us is increasing. Right? We're constantly getting asked to do more speaking engagements. So I'm a little bit more optimistic. I think this thing is going to happen. It's going to hit a tipping point, and there's going to be no stopping it. Because the federal government can't, because it's in the state's hands. That's the whole idea behind this. And thank you for coming today.
Yeah, thanks.
This really should be an easy sell when you have
there were people who are just, we have a 19% approval rate, it should be an easy sell. So what I would like to see for myself is, you know, I want something simple that I can get people to sign up, I can pass things out to people I talk. When I'm engaged with a political conversation where people are dying, I want an easy sell, let's sign this thing up, that's where we're going.
Can I address that real quick?
Yeah.
I was gonna address this at the end, but I'm gonna say it now. We are all on social media. Who has a social media account? Most of us do, right? I'm going to tell you, we have a COS Twitter account. Follow our Twitter account, and I'm gonna tell you, one of the things I'm gonna ask you for at the end of all of this, and Margie may get mad at me for saying this, but I'm gonna say it anyway, is we need social media warriors. We need those people. In our Twitter account, we need to have that sign a petition on every one of our posts. It's got to be on there. That will amplify our voice because you can share from Twitter to other social medias, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. If you are a social media person, please see me before you leave.
We have almost all those accounts. We
Right.
have an Illinois Facebook, we have an Illinois this, an Illinois
Right.
that. They're out there, social media warriors. See anything on any of ours, forward it on. You know, the more we spread, our Southern Illinois people are doing real good in passing up the Facebook. Up here, not so much. It's out there. Yes, you don't have to be an official volunteer even to be a social media warrior. Just
Right.
keep watching things and forwarding them.
Our Twitter handle is @COS Illinois.
I think so.
Yeah, @COS Illinois. I think I looked it up this morning.
Oh, good.
Write that down. Please see us. Go ahead.
I'm Joe Pisano, and I lived 15 years in the state of Arizona. And the majority leader of the state legislature that refused to bring forward the convention of states because he said he would not have enough votes to vote it in. Now, how often do we, how many chances do we have to bring this to the state legislature?
Bring it in, Illinois, every year.
As you want?
Yes.
Okay, so interesting that you say that. Do you know who that gentleman was?
I mean, he's now a House of Representatives, Andy Biggs.
Andy Biggs.
Yep.
Andy Biggs stopped our resolution in Arizona for years. As soon as he went to the House of Representatives, it passed like that.
That's exactly
So
right.
he was blocking it. That's politics, ladies and gentlemen. Politics is a dirty, ugly
To
thing.
contact your state legislature.
Yeah, now our section.
That's right. Can you say that again?
It's important that all of us continue to contact our state legislature.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll mention this too and remind you of this. When you walked in, if you were walking in particular, they may have asked you at the check-in table if you knew what House district you are. Let me say this, I'm in the 14th congression, right? Federally, right? So 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, when I was just starting at Convention of States, somebody said, what House district are you? And I said, oh, that's easy, Lauren Underwood. That's the wrong answer, right? I didn't know. My point is, I didn't know. Even though I've been voting for 50 years, I didn't know. So it's so important for you to know who your House district is. Number one, State House, Springfield. Who's your Springfield rep? Your rep here in DeKalb is a fellow named Jeff Keicher. Or if you're on the far west side, that's 76, that's a fellow named Lance Yedna. Lance happens to be a Democrat. Lance is a pretty modern Democrat. In fact, he would be really, really close to being a co-sponsor of our resolution. The only problem is, he's decided he's not gonna run. He's not gonna rerun. So, anyway, to answer your question, maybe from a numbers perspective, where are we at in Illinois, right? There are 118 House districts in Illinois. There's 2 House districts for each Senate district. So there's 118 House districts, and there's 59 Senate districts. Our resolution, HJR3, House Joint Resolution 3, you can look it up if you want to go to ilga.gov. If you want to write that down, ilga.gov. It's kind of clunky to navigate, but if you go there, on the left-hand side, you can put in a bill number. You put in HJR3, and you can read them. And you can see who the sponsors are of the bill. Our chief sponsor is a fellow named Brad Holbrook from down in southern Illinois area. We've got, I'm not sure exactly what the number would be today. We might have 28 or 30 co-sponsors. So here's what's going on in Illinois, right? 118 seats. I'm not sure, again, of the exact numbers. Let's say there's 40 Republicans and 78 Democrats. We have no Democrat co-sponsors on the bill. The Republicans verbally have told us that if it ever got to the floor, they would sign, they would vote yes. Verbally, they've said that. It's kind of like your point about, okay, we want a roll call. I feel like there are probably some folks with R's after their names, squishy, that if it ever got to the floor, they'd cave.
A little squeamy.
So let's face it, we gotta have 60 votes, probably gotta have 65 votes to bring it to the floor. And we wouldn't want to bring it to the floor unless we had the votes to pass. Here's what, if it ever got brought to the floor and got voted down on it, you can't bring it up for another 2 years. So that's where we are. Now, here's the good news. I don't know, good news or bad news. The state convention of states leadership team and our district captains and our regional captains are aggressively courting moderate Democrats. We've identified 25, 28, 27 now, maybe 28 with another one I added yesterday. Moderate Democrats who probably would vote no today, but we believe that we can begin a relationship with them, right? And we've heard it, I've heard it more than once. I've heard it, I've been in many Democrat reps' offices, and one in particular, she says, you know, I can deal with the term limit thing. I kind of like that, I get it. I absolutely am all over the whole balanced budget thing, even though all this money comes back to us from the federal government. We can talk about that too. That's why they're afraid of a balanced budget amendment, by the way. They're afraid of if they make the government, at the federal level, if they impose a balanced budget, right? They're going to turn, the spigot's going to get turned off. The money's going to quit flowing.
Exactly.
We can talk about that. Anyway, so she said, I can deal with the term limits and I really like the balanced budget, but I'm absolutely against this business about reducing the scope of the federal government for whatever reason. And here's my answer to that. Okay. How about this? If we get to convention, who knows what's going to happen at convention? Like we said, you know, maybe one amendment comes out, maybe 3 comes out, whatever. Those amendments will come out and you'll get to vote on each amendment on an individual basis. It's not a package deal, right? So let's not just throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Let's get to convention and let it happen. And maybe a term limit amendment comes out of it, or maybe a balanced budget amendment comes out of it. Illinois can vote no against all of those if they want to. But remember, we got 38 states. So that's my answer to that person.
And I think that person that Lance is talking about, we met with my state representative. Unfortunately, my representative is AOC Junior. Her name is Ann Stavamari. She's the most liberal person in Springfield. I lose IQ points every time I talk with her. That said, she listens to a lot of the garbage coming from Common Cause, who are vehemently against this. I actually watched a video of a recent Common Cause webinar where they refer to us as a constitutional convention, not an amending convention, which is what we are. We are an amending convention. And they totally disregard the biggest safety net for anything bad happening, which is ratification required by 38 states, which really means 13 states can block anything bad, which really means one legislative house in each of 13 states can block anything bad. And their argument on common cause is, oh, you're gonna get rid of civil rights and the First Amendment.
You just lied.
I mean, it's complete nonsense. Not only would those, as Margie said earlier, not only would any attempt to bring that up be ruled out of order at convention, but let's say on a crazy whim, fear from the left, get rid of the First Amendment. Fear on the right, get rid of the Second Amendment. If either or both of those, which is not gonna happen, would come out of convention, is that gonna pass in 38 states?
Right.
No way. So the arguments against us and common cause, this is the biggest thing that George Soros's common cause is doing, is to block us. Okay, let me just finish it.
Yeah.
So this is the biggest thing that they are trying to do, and it is all built on fear.
No facts.
Where's the irony of this whole concept of people having a voice and then them talking about taking away the First Amendment? It's just saying. I mean, this is exactly what you're supporting when you're saying. We want the people to speak up in their state.
And remember, the name of this country is not the United People of America. It is the United States. States. We are made up of states. And each of those states was intended as a laboratory of democracy. Have you ever heard that before? So Idaho can do one thing and Alabama another, Illinois something else. And if people like it, they stay and they're attracted to Florida. And if people don't like it, they vote with their feet.
Mark responded on the other night in Crown Point about this whole thing about the Second Amendment. Again, remember the states were sending these delegations with this application that you saw. The application specifically said you can talk about these things. If I were a state legislator, and let's say I was nervous about this, I was skeptical about it, right? But Jim convinced me that, okay, sign it, because when we send our delegation, they have strict orders. This is what they can talk about. And I'd say, okay, under that pretense, I can sign it. If they get to this meeting and they start talking about taking away the Second Amendment, I'm going to be jumping up and down and pounding on the table, right? Well, anyway, but even if, again, back to the whole thing, even if Mark said, look, there are 35 states in this country that have open carry law. You don't need a permit or anything. 35 states have open carry, and he rattled off some other statistics. He said in Texas, even not even in Texas, I think he said there were 13 states. You can go to your, listen to this, you can go to your state house. He says, I think they even have a fast track lane in Texas for this. You can go to your state house with a loaded gun, with a loaded AR hanging on your shoulder, and you can go watch the proceedings. So if you think for a minute that they would propose rescinding the Second Amendment and it would be ratified by 38 states. Anyway,
Marty, you're saying something?
That's gonna drill down just a little bit. Indiana has already gone through the process. I mean, they were the sixth state to pass. And they've gone through the process of how they're going to pick their delegates. And there's a very detailed version of it. They're using them as Senate Enrolled Act and Enrolled Acts in the legislature. They both are, of what delegates can and cannot do. It's not just the three pillars. There are things that they can and cannot do. And if you can have multiple delegates, but you only have one commissioner, that one person is delegated to cast the vote. It's not just whoever wakes up first in the morning and gets down there. If that person is found not to be following the rules of the Indiana charge to their delegate, they can be yanked out of there right away. There will be a commission of the state Supreme Court, lower court, and somebody in the, I think it was a constitutional lawyer, will hear what's going on, what he or she did or did not do, can be found guilty of a felony. I think it's a class 4 felony, and have a $10,000 fine. So states are taking this very seriously. This is not just because they have the 3 pillars. This is no joke to them. And one thing that I wish would come out is, I didn't know this till this year, is the state can set these rules before they ever decide to go and deal with the call. Whereas that's why I brought it up, is common cause. I was listening to that crowd last night. Well, we don't know this and we don't know that, and how are they gonna do this?
Here's
It's
how.
all here. This is, if you ever want to know, Robert Nadelson is one of the best, probably the epitome of Article 5 specialized people.
He's a constitutional lawyer.
The law of Article 5 is his specialty. This details all the things in that. And it's the procedures. There's a whole section on procedures and how we're doing this and stuff. Common cause is so full of crap. We don't know what's going to happen. Oh yeah, we do. And then Indiana is on paper. A lot of the other past states are on paper.
That's great. That's great.
There have been 42 different conventions of states in our history. None under Article 5, but there have been 42 conventions. So the precedent is all here. And common cause talks about, we don't know what's going to happen, fear, and this could happen, and that could happen, fear. So we are battling common cause on the left.
And a lot of
We're also battling the John Birch Society on the right.
Yeah.
And
They're really
their entire premise is the Constitutional Convention of 1787 was illegal and unauthorized, but don't mess with our precious Constitution. So it's schizophrenic.
So there were 13 states, 1787. Rhode Island didn't attend. 12 states sent delegates. 10 of those 12 states, in their specific wording to their commissioners, just the same way Margie was talking about, 10 of those states says, as you saw up here on the slide, do what you have to do to render the preservation of the government, right? The meeting in the prior year, 1786, there was a meeting in Annapolis, which was more limited, and I'm not an expert about this, but they realized then that they were not going to be able to amend the articles. Why? Because Rhode Island was abstaining. So Rhode Island was out. The only way to amend the Articles of Confederation was to have unanimous consent from all 13 states. So at that point, they knew that was off the table. And the Congress called for the meeting. Congress called for the meeting in 1787 and said, the purpose of the meeting is to amend the articles, okay? But under the Articles of Confederation, which was a treaty between 13 sovereign states, really, if you will,
Yes.
Congress didn't have the authority to call the meeting. The states called the meetings. And when the states sent their delegates to the meeting, they said, do what you got to do.
Well, actually, prior to Congress doing the Continental Congress.
Right. The contact, that was our first and only contact.
But
Right.
the actual call was originated with the state of Virginia.
Yes.
Before Congress. And that was the first wording, any exigencies to preserve the Union.
And by the way, my wife asked me, and I gotta share this. This is pretty fun. But, well, for me, maybe not for you guys. There have been 42 official conventions of states. Anybody know when the last one was? 2017, Phoenix, Arizona. Anybody know what the topic was? Let's get together and talk about proposing an amendment for a balanced budget. Now, it was attended by 22 states, all right? So they got together for 3 or 4 days, they talked about how they could get to a convention for proposed amendments, but, and I'm getting kind of in the weeds here a little bit, but it wasn't officially an Article 5 convention, right? Because they didn't have a quorum. You'd need 34 states to get to an Article 5 convention. They only had 22. So apparently it must have died at that point, but anyway.
Right.
So we've had conventions.
Okay, so it's real clear, the term limits, it's real clear, the budget deficit, all that kind of thing, some details to be kind of drilled down to. The third one, the limitation of federal government, it just seems so vague to me because I don't know whether the goal is to get back to the original Constitution, to stop the progression of the continued largesse of the Constitution, that 3,000 page thing. Where are we going? What's ideal and what is actually?
Right, so, but we don't know what the actual amendments would be. Convention of States as an organization does not propose amendments. Two that I can think of right off the top of my head, because I remember when these agencies were formed. I believe it was 1974, Department of Energy was created to make the United States energy independent. How many times has that happened? Once, under, oh, yeah, how about that? And now we're not by any means. And so here's a nice proposal for me. Hereby eliminate the Department of Energy, period. It's a waste of money. How about the Department of Education? Prior to that, education was a state responsibility, and each state had their own departments of education, which, by the way, still exist. So how about get rid of the United States Department of Education? I worked in human resources my whole career, okay? One of the agencies I dealt with was a monstrosity called OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, okay? Every state has its own safety organization. In Michigan, it's called Michigan OSHA. In Illinois, it's something else. Get rid of that. There's, the fear of the common cause that will get rid of civil rights acts. Okay. I had to work with all of this stuff on both the federal and state level. When there was a charge of discrimination against one of my clients, we would get the exact same charge from the United States Department of Civil Rights, EEOC, Equal Employment. It's been 3 years. I've been retired almost 3 years. He said with a smile. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and the Illinois Department of Human Rights. So there's duplication in these things. The states can do all of these things. We are a United States. We are a constitutional republic, and don't let anybody ever tell you we are a democracy. We are not.
We're not.
We are a constitutional republic.
Terry, I would actually really, we're kind of running low on time, but
Yeah.
I would agree with you. That one's kind of squishy, but I don't know. One of the proposals that came out of the simulated convention that just happened, and I've got 3 copies of the proposals that came out and I'll pass them out. I only have 3, but you can
Take a photograph of it.
take a photograph of them or something if you want. But one of the proposed amendments that came out of that was the states clarifying what the Commerce Clause had the authority to do. The federal government has completely abused the Commerce Clause. So one of the amendments was, here's what interstate commerce means.
They use that under Obama.
Healthcare?
Sure.
Yeah,
With the
yeah.
Commerce Clause, wasn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Marty.
We've talked, everything we've talked about is kind of long-term, and I want you, I sat in one of these one time and thought, what can I do? And so I don't know what your closing is, but my aim to you would be, get involved. Please, before you leave, sign the petition. If you want to volunteer, be sure you sign the petition and give us your phone number or your email so we can contact you. Beyond that, get involved however you can. Get involved, go to city council meetings, school board meetings. Yes, they're boring as heck, but we've got to get the people there to be the watchdogs locally. We've got to build this country
Build this company.
back from the ground up. We talk about replacing people in Washington. We're not, my opinion is we need to start here and go up. So it's going to be us in the local elections. It's us monitoring things. How many people know that if you're an election judge, you get paid? If you want something to do, patriotic, that's extremely important, is being an election judge. Me in Little Marshall County, my last election was $200. Now that's right.
2:30.
Well, that's 5 in the morning till about 8 at night, but still, that replaced what I lost in wages. So there's that. You can be a poll watcher for organizations. You can run people right now, who we're hoping would see politicians here today running. Get there. If you see anybody say, can I sign your petition to run? You're not saying, I want to sign, saying you're going to win on you're my candidate. You're giving these people the right to run for an office. So please, if somebody says, will you sign my petition? I want to be House rep, I want to be precinct committeeman, I want to be something. Please sign them and enable the people in the grassroots to start moving up. We've got to take the country back from bottom up. If you don't want to do that, you can make phone calls for COS. You can make phone trees for your church or your school, whatever. Get involved so you matter in the community. You're connected to things. Things aren't sneaking under the door. I can't say a lot of things because the building we're in, but the national president of that organization is a Nevada Marxist. And she thinks that like buildings are the ideal place to start indoctrination. So things have snuck in and we've not paid attention to it. We now at the bottom have to go up.
And I just want to say really quick that I'm a resident here in DeKalb. And so, yes, if anybody wants to come, talk to me about what's going on here. Yes, it's like the young female lady out there is talking about getting involved. I was recently involved with a school board meeting, and let me tell you something. I had asked a couple of key questions, and I had my eyes open big time on what people think here. And it relates to, what goes down even in Springfield, because yes, they get their marching orders from Springfield. And for any of you, because now this is my oldest son right here. I've got 4 kids involved in the school district here. And it is kind of sad that they don't really take your opinions to heart unless there's enough people getting involved in the grassroots movement and doing what is necessary.
Thank you for your
You're right.
service, sir.
Thank you for your service. Yeah, it's a numbers game. It's all the numbers.
Speaking of young people, back to young people, if you have a person in your family area that will be 18 by the national election in November of next year, they can register to vote as long as they're going to be 18 by the federal election. So they can participate in the Illinois primaries and they can vote in the national. Get your kids registered to vote. I've met some exceptional, I don't know how old you are, sir. Everybody looks young to me. But there's some fabulous young people who are awake and who are. So get your kids there. If Bridge Club wants to go vote as a Bridge Club, and then go out to lunch and play bridge somewhere. Get your bowling team to the bowling alley, carpool from your church. Get the people to the polls in March. Educate yourself as best you can. Please, ground up, let's educate ourselves. And then we're gonna naturally.
One more question.
Yes.
Well, it's not a question, it's a comment. One of the things that I'm trying to do, well, first off, when you talk about the federal government thing, it's just really one job, protection of the states, really put what it is, right, narrow it down to that. But one of the things that I'm trying to do is when people go to school board meetings, it's always a one-way conversation, right?
Yes.
You go to the township meeting, it's a one-way conversation. We're locked into all this stuff. So I'm a township supervisor, and what I'm trying to do within our township, and I've got some commitment for some of these agencies like the school, like I know I'm working on force with her, like the fire and township, is to be able to have a meeting where people can get back and forth with where their money's going instead of one-way conversations. It's going to take me a while, but I'm getting commitments from people. And I also want to try to get other township supervisors to do the same thing, because that's where you really get the voice of the people if they feel they can actually get their point across.
Right.
What township?
Later.
Good for you.
Let's thank our panel.
We need to move along.
Yeah, let's thank our panel. All right, I did promise you, that our voice is gonna get louder. And it is gonna get louder. And I'm gonna show you a video right now why we believe it's going to get louder.
Here's the important point about this, okay? An Article 5 convention is only allowed to propose amendments. The safeguard that the founders had the divine wisdom to put into the Constitution is that the ratification process is the safeguard. So let's say this hypothetical was true, which it is not, and there are libraries of information that have been written on this, libraries of constitutional scholarship that debunks some of the myths that are being presented here. But let's just assume for the sake of argument that Representative Carter was right, and that it was a runaway, they came up with some crazy idea, they wanted to reinstitute slavery or something. You have to get 38 states to ratify that. It ain't never gonna happen, right? You have this process where you have to have the majority of the convention delegates to propose it. They have no authority to ratify their own proposals. It goes through the process like every other constitutional amendment has. The reason we only have this limited number of amendments, you know, there are hundreds of constitutional amendments that have been proposed in the last 239 years, hundreds of them. We only have a small handful that are in the document. You know why? Because the ratification process is the safeguard against that kind of madness. That is not a legitimate threat. We've debated this a long time. There's a lot more that can and should be said, but we don't have the ability to do it today. If you vote for this amendment, you are killing the bill and you are taking Louisiana out of this process. It's an important one. I have come to this conclusion myself after lots of study, prayer, and deliberation. This is what I do. I'm a constitutional lawyer. I was reluctant in the beginning, but I have come to the conclusion myself, for me, that the overreach of the federal government is so out of control, and it is exactly what the founders anticipated in the Federalist Papers, what they were concerned would happen, that this is the measure of last resort. And my friends, to me, we are at the last resort. And so that's why I support it. I oppose the amendment and vote your conscience. I think all of you recognize, regardless of party, regardless of political ideology, I think one thing most of us in this room could agree on is that the government has grown too large, at least on a federal level. Let's agree, the government is doing too much. I will tell you, it's doing way more than the founders intended or designed it to do. And so they had the wisdom to put a safeguard in the Constitution. I mean, I believe the Constitution was divinely inspired. There's no way they could have had the wisdom to anticipate all these things that would happen. Yeah. And they put this safeguard in there. They said, look, we want the power to be reserved to the people. Lincoln said, government of the people, by the people, for the people. The only way to ensure that is to have the safeguard in the Constitution that the states get the final say. And the way that they designed it, the way that the states have the final say, when this thing grows too large and it's doing too much and it's out of control, it's the people's voice. It's us as the representatives of the people in here today that get to make that affirmative vote to say, we agree it's too big. We know there's no other way to limit it, and we're willing to go this great length to make that happen. This is our chance. As I said, I came to this conclusion myself reluctantly, but I'm there. I think we have to do it. If you don't like the current candidates, the leading candidates for president of the United States, whichever side of the aisle in here that you're on, there is great fear and concern. I think that's legitimate, regardless of who the next commander-in-chief is, that they will continue to grow this thing. That they're not going to limit government on the federal level. They're going to continue to usurp our authority.
And I mean, not just the state's authority, I'm talking about the people. We the people. This is the safeguard. I am convinced that we should take this step, and I hope you'll join me in it. Thank you.
62 yeas and 36 nays, and the resolution's been adopted.
Who was that?
The speaker,
It's the Speaker of the House.
what year was that?
2000, they were the eighth state.
He's been 8 years
Yes,
in Congress.
so
Or
I.
5 years in Congress.
Jim. Okay, Lance handed out and passed out 15 minutes for Freedom Pledge. Did anybody sign it? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Anyone else sign this? This is the greatest way to get involved, to become an activist for Convention of States.
Yeah.
We really appreciate people stepping forward and saying, I will do this. I will work a couple of hours a month to help save our community.
All right, if you have that filled up, pass it over and we will contact you. But anyway, we do now have a voice at a very high level that does support Convention of States, and they amended, and they voted in for our resolution. We have the speaker now, so our voice is gonna get louder, and so will the opposition is gonna get louder. So, we talked a lot about volunteer today, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this. But I will tell you, if you have any special skill, if you have any desire in your heart to do something, you're qualified. You're absolutely qualified. Before you leave here, I would like to personally meet you before you leave if you want to volunteer. Lance wants to meet you before you leave. We want to talk to those of you that want to volunteer. All we're asking for is 15 minutes. Whatever you want to do. If your skill is you're good at writing, great. If you're good at communicating and you're good at blogging, great. If you are a social media warrior, I definitely want to meet you. We need those. So please, before you leave, just check in with us real quick. This is the 15 minutes. I think everybody has this. That's what you're looking at right now. So, our handle on Twitter is @COSIllinois. Please follow us. Thank you for coming today. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.